It began with a single leak. One buried line inside a classified cable that was enough to unsettle an entire nation. Traoré suddenly had 48 hours to hand over 60% of Burkina Faso's oil and gold, or face dire repercussions. And the signature at the bottom read, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. This was not subtle diplomacy. It was a hard-edged commercial offensive cloaked in statecraft, a blunt ultimatum that demanded near-total control of newly discovered resources. According to sources, the cable did not arrive by accident, but was personally delivered by a trusted intermediary, a former U.S. military attaché escorted by private American security contractors, placed on Captain Ibrahim Traoré's desk at dawn with an unambiguous message. Let U.S. corporations begin extraction and gold exports now. Surrender long-term control of energy policy to an American-led economic board within 48 hours. Or face sanctions, blockades, and engineered instability. The tone was transactional and unapologetic. We protected you from terror. Now settle the tab. But the man who received the demand was no supplicant. Captain Traoré did not blink. He summoned his intelligence chief and top commander and answered with steel, telling them flatly, Burkina Faso is not for sale. By midday, the story had exploded across African news networks from Lagos to Kinshasa. Headlines accusing foreign powers of resource predation went viral, and the world watched as Ouagadougou braced for a showdown. What those in Washington underestimated was that for months, a vast secret had been quietly incubating beneath the parched plains of northern Burkina Faso, verified oil fields mapped by a clandestine geological task force after Traoré's takeover, with scans run by Russian engineers, covert sorties flown by Iranian drones, and technical teams from North Korea securing the data. Everything had been classified until the first drill breached the surface, and, like a flare in the dark, attracted the ever-present eyes in orbit. American and French satellites flagged anomalous energy signatures, tracked equipment flows from Iran and Venezuela, and intercepted encrypted chatter hinting at a sovereign petroleum corridor. Soon the gold signals brightened too. Ouagadougou had already been reclaiming mines, expelling foreign contractors, replacing French-controlled firms with national military units, and rerouting revenues into a domestic development fund. Actions that spelled the end of the old extraction model and signaled a new path. Resources owned and managed at home, backed by its army and its citizens. That prospect terrified the powers who long profited from the status quo. They didn't merely want access to oil and gold, they wanted to prevent the model from spreading to Mali, Niger, Chad, or Congo. Phone calls began circulating among energy giants and corridors of power. Exxon, Chevron, DC operatives, all asking how to stop what they feared could become a Libyan-style pivot toward African ownership. The chosen remedy was pressure, and the message that arrived in Ouagadougou read less like a diplomatic cable and more like an extortion memo. A 7-page strategic resource acquisition framework marked confidential that demanded 60% of oil output for U.S. firms under the guise of stabilization, control over major gold export routes, an American advisory committee overseeing contracts and revenues, and in return, promises of security, cooperation, and protection. A thinly veiled guarantee against regime change if compliance followed. In bold red ink scrawled at the top, 48 hours. This was no longer just economic pressure, it was imperialism 2.0, bold, open, and unapologetic. In Washington, officials tried to distance themselves, pretending Trump was acting on impulse, outside the boundaries of formal U.S. policy. But behind closed doors, no one moved to stop him. Because the truth was uncomfortable, Trump was simply voicing what many in the establishment had quietly believed for decades. It doesn't matter who governs Africa, as long as we control what lies beneath it. Captain Ibrahim Traoré received that message clearly. His decision was already made. No foreign power would decide the destiny of Burkina Faso. If this was to be a power play, he would meet it head-on, not as a pawn, but as a sovereign leader of a sovereign nation. And Trump had just threatened the wrong soldier. When the ultimatum arrived in the war room, Traoré didn't flinch. He read it twice, set the papers aside, then rose and said with cold precision, "So that's their price for peace? Slavery." Dressed in a suit and tie, he turned to his commanders and declared, "They want 60% of our future? Then they'll get 100% of our resistance." There were no frantic calls to Paris or Washington. Instead, he contacted the head of the Special Sovereignty Force, an elite shadow unit built for moments exactly like this. Orders came fast. Secure every oil field, double the guard on gold convoys, shut down all data access to foreign contractors, and prepare national television. A message was coming. Not in secret cables, but in daylight, for the world to see. By noon, the entire country was glued to their screens. The broadcast began with silence, a black screen, then the flicker of a live feed. No studio, no spectacle. Just Traore in uniform, one hand resting on the Burkina Faso flag, the other gripping a folder stamped "Confidential, U.S. Threat." His tone was calm, his gaze sharp as a blade. To the people of Burkina Faso and to our African brothers and sisters, he began, an offer has been made. To sell our oil, our gold, and our honor in exchange for fear. He paused. The air hung heavy. To those behind this insult, to Mr. Trump and his backers, you have misjudged us. We are not Libya. We are not Iraq. We are not your playground. We will never trade our land for your luxury. We will never bow to your bullets or your banks. You gave us 48 hours. Here is our reply. You now have 48 hours to take your greed, your threats, and your arrogance, and leave African soil. He ended the broadcast with a salute and walked off screen. No negotiations, no compromises, no retreat. Across Africa, the speech struck like lightning. Cheers erupted from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Hashtags exploded, flags were raised, and for the first time in years, a wave of unity swept across the continent. But while crowds celebrated, a quieter storm brewed elsewhere. In oil boardrooms and intelligence offices, panic set in. At ExxonMobil, urgent calls lit up lines to D.C. At Halliburton, crisis teams scrambled to evaluate losses. And deep inside CIA headquarters in Langley, alarms began to flash red. The problem wasn't just Traoré's defiance, it was that he'd gone public. If Burkina Faso could say no and survive, what would stop Mali, Niger, Chad, or Congo from doing the same? Pressure mounted swiftly. CIA operatives began appearing more frequently in West Africa. Surveillance drones flew tighter loops over oil fields and gold routes. Online, smear campaigns mushroomed, labeling Traoré unstable, erratic, even insane. Near the Ghana border, witnesses reported private military contractors moving in, men tied to a shadowy intelligence firm known for regime operations. The message from Washington was unmistakable. End this. Now. Yet Traoré's words had already echoed too far to be silenced. Africa is not yours to buy. Their new strategy became one of destabilization from within. Western media networks suddenly harmonized their tone. CNN, BBC, and others all warning that Burkina Faso faced economic isolation and humanitarian disaster. Analysts claimed Traoré was leading his nation into ruin. But on the ground, the opposite was happening. Across Burkina Faso, resistance was rising, not just militarily, but culturally. Students held campus teach-ins on sovereignty and resource justice. Women's unions delivered food and supplies to soldiers guarding the mines. And every time a foreign network aired another hit piece, young people didn't rage. They laughed, reposting clips with the caption, "If they hate him this much, he must be doing something right." Captain Ibrahim Traoré understood something vital. The true enemy wasn't one man or one administration. It was the entire machine. The banks, the oil conglomerates, the intelligence networks, and the media empires that had drained Africa for generations. And now, that machine had turned its full weight on a single leader. Because he had done the unthinkable. He said no, and meant it. Burkina Faso was now under siege, politically, economically, and digitally. But Traoré was no longer standing alone. Just days after his bold defiance of Trump's ultimatum, 3 military planes touched down in Ouagadougou. No bombs, no weapons. Just brothers. From Mali came Colonel Assimi Goïta, calm, deliberate. From Niger, General Abdourahmane Chiani, eyes burning with resolve. If you touch Burkina Faso, they came not as envoys, but as allies in a growing movement. One nation's stand had just ignited a continental awakening. This wasn't diplomacy anymore. It was revolution, and it was happening in real time. From Guinea came Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, walking tall through the gates of the presidential palace. No suits, no diplomats, no foreign handlers, just a soldier representing a nation that had long refused to bow. He joined Traoré, Goïta, and Chiani, and when the 3 men emerged side by side before the cameras, the world felt the tremor. Then came the line that changed everything. You touch all of us. It wasn't just a statement. It was the birth of a doctrine, Africa's answer to NATO, the AES Shield. Within days, the alliance became more than symbolism. Mali dispatched battle-hardened advisors to fortify Burkina Faso's oil zones. Niger sent logistics teams to navigate desert terrain. Guinea opened its airspace for emergency supply runs. Together, they weren't just defending borders. They were defending an idea, sovereignty, and this time, the fight wasn't confined to the battlefield. AES-backed media outlets launched an aggressive counteroffensive online, dismantling Western propaganda piece by piece. They exposed how resource wars were disguised as humanitarian missions, flooded feeds with documentaries, and rallied millions under one chant, "Our resources, our future, our fight." The ripple spread fast. In Bamako, thousands filled the streets chanting Traoré's name. In Conakry, murals appeared overnight. Traoré painted atop oil barrels, waving the Burkina flag against a burning western skyline. In Chad and the Central African Republic, youth groups marched under a single slogan, sovereignty or death. Meanwhile, Western intelligence agencies scrambled to contain what they called the Pan-African fire. But they'd already lost the narrative. This wasn't just about Burkina Faso anymore. It was an awakening, a Pan-African firewall against foreign domination. And Traoré wasn't backing down. He was advancing, surrounded by brothers forged in war, betrayal, and the shared dream of a continent free from external control. While Western powers argued and fumed behind closed doors, two global giants made their moves. Quiet, methodical, and unapologetic. China and Russia. They didn't arrive with threats or sanctions. They came with something far more valuable: support, technology, and respect. Their message to Traoré was simple: you are not alone. Just 72 hours after Trump's ultimatum hit the world stage, a small Chinese delegation landed discreetly in Ouagadougou. No fanfare, no press, just engineers and diplomats with a proposal that stunned the West: a complete, operational oil refinery, designed, built, and delivered in 90 days. Advanced gold valuation systems that removed Western banks from the process entirely. And most importantly, a digital trade platform powered by China's digital yuan, cutting out both the CFA franc and the US dollar. For the first time in its history, Burkina Faso wouldn't just own its resources, it would control the entire value chain. Russia followed immediately. The next morning, a gray Ilyushin military transport touched down on a secure airstrip outside Ouagadougou, carrying advanced electronic warfare systems and several unmarked crates labeled specialized defense assets. Translation: Burkina Faso's oil fields now had Russian-grade anti-drone protection. Washington went into meltdown. CNN called it a dangerous new axis. The State Department accused Traoré of selling out to dictatorships, but in Africa, nobody cared what the West thought anymore. On the streets, people didn't see Russia and China as puppet masters. They saw them as tools in a long overdue reclamation. To them, Traoré wasn't bowing to anyone. He was fighting back, and AES? That was the future. A future without colonial strings, where Africa set the price and wrote the contracts. Traoré had done the impossible. He rejected a US ultimatum, exposed a global resource heist, and united half of West Africa, with China and Russia standing behind him. The Western media erupted. CNN flashed red banners. Burkina Faso threatens U.S. strategic interests. Fox News screamed panic. Trade must be stopped. Panels filled with retired generals, CIA veterans, and oil executives, all repeating the same word. Dangerous. They called him a madman, a dictator, a puppet, the next Gaddafi. But online, the people weren't fooled. Social media exploded with hashtags. Le lions rêve, the lion awakens. Africa is not for sale. We are all Burkina. Creators across the continent flooded YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram with tributes. Even African Americans joined in. This man just told Trump over my dead body. And lived. That's leadership. In Burkina Faso, the youth clapped back with humor. They turned CNN clips into protest songs, memes, and dance challenges. T-shirts appeared everywhere. If CNN hates you, you're doing something right. Traoré had become more than a president. He was a symbol, a meme, a movement, a living challenge to the global order. Even Time magazine couldn't ignore it. Their next digital cover read, "The man America can't bully, inside Traoré's African uprising. But fame brings danger." As Traoré's name dominated global headlines, threats multiplied. Private intelligence firms launched cyber attacks. Western troll farms flooded social media with fake scandals. And in Washington, the whispers grew louder. It's time for regime change. Still, none of it mattered, because the people saw through it. They understood the script. Africa wasn't supposed to fight back, wasn't supposed to win, and definitely wasn't supposed to go viral. Yet here was a 35-year-old soldier from Ouagadougou, trending harder than most Western presidents. No PR firm, no billionaire backers, just truth, courage, and oil. Then came the moment that turned defiance into destiny. As the 24-hour mark of the ultimatum passed, Traore summoned an emergency session of Burkina Faso's National Assembly. No press, no leaks. Behind locked doors, under his direct command, lawmakers passed a historic decree. All oil and gold reserves within Burkina Faso are hereby nationalized and permanently protected from all forms of foreign corporate ownership. By sunrise, the ink was dry. The orders were signed. Every Western company still operating on Burkinabe soil received the same message. Pack your bags. You're done here. Licenses were revoked. Contracts canceled. French and Canadian mining firms expelled. A US-backed energy survey team escorted to the border. Burkina Faso had just declared full economic independence, and the world had no idea what was coming next. Foreign diplomats were informed in unmistakable terms. Burkina Faso's resources were not up for discussion. Then Traoré appeared on national television, not in uniform or surrounded by guards, but in traditional Burkinabe attire, calm and unarmed. His voice carried the steadiness of conviction as he said, "We have been exploited for generations. Now that we've found our wealth, they want to take it back. But I am not here to serve empires. I am here to serve a people who have suffered too long." He paused, letting the silence speak before delivering the line that shook the nation. "Burkina Faso is not afraid, and I will not negotiate with thieves." The streets erupted in response. Drums, fireworks, chants echoing through Ouagadougou. "He said no! He said no!" Across Africa, the phrase, "We protect what's ours," flooded social media as young people held up soil, gold, and oil in solidarity. Trump's ultimatum had expired, and Traoré hadn't just resisted, he had rewritten the rules. Within hours, Washington went silent. No statements, no press briefings, only quiet panic in oil boardrooms and diplomatic halls. Then, at exactly 7:42 a.m. Eastern Time, Donald J. Trump shattered the silence with an all-caps tweet. "Traoré just made the biggest mistake of his life. Africa will pay for this." Markets trembled, media went into frenzy, but in Ouagadougou, Traoré only smiled and said, "That's the sound of an empire losing control." Yet the threat was real. Satellite activity surged over West Africa. U.S. naval vessels shifted toward the Gulf of Guinea, and AFRICOM issued discreet warnings. Burkina Faso's military moved fast, activating air defenses, locking gold routes, deploying special forces. Within hours, allies responded. Mali sent armored convoys across the border, Nigeria raised its radar, and Guinea announced a rapid response pact, pledging immediate retaliation against any foreign aggression. But what followed next defied geopolitics. It became a movement. From Lagos to Nairobi to Johannesburg, crowds filled the streets outside U.S. embassies holding signs that read, "Touch Traoré and you touch all of us. Africa is not your minefield. Keep your democracy, we'll keep our dignity." In Washington, frustration boiled. The economic siege had failed, the narrative had collapsed, and then came the final blow, a 43-second video. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, looking straight into the lens, spoke with calm fire. "This is not just about oil. This is not just about gold. This is about the soul of Africa. And I would rather die standing than live kneeling." Within 2 days, the clip went viral across the continent. Former African leaders broke years of silence to call him the start of a new dawn, a man who dared to say no when others bowed. The world held its breath, but for Africa, it was the first deep breath of freedom in generations.